Welcome to the Old Lumens channel again. Today I'm going to work on making a battery holder or battery carrier for a flashlight. This one is going to be for three 18650 batteries in series. I'm just going to show you, how I go about making one with hand tools. There's nothing really that is necessary for a power tool. I'm using these breadboards, PC boards, whatever you want to call them. They come from Radio Shack. They come in a package with 4 different size boards, and I'm using the 2 largest sizes. This size will actually be the size of the holder. This bigger size, in order to not have to waste anything, I will be cutting down to the size of this one. I have some copper rounds right here. Yeah, drop on the ground. There'll be contact points. I don't have the springs laying out. I have a couple gold-plated springs I'll need. I have a pair of cutters. I have a pair of scissors. I have a marker, a little awl. I have a pop rivet tool and some pop rivets. I have some 5/16 inch brass tubing, 1/8 inch diameter. The pop rivets will go in it. Those will be the uprights made out of brass tubing. I have one contact plate already done, and I'll show you how I make them. This is sandwiched together 2 pieces of plate, so it's much stiffer, and will take a lot more shock, or before it breaks. They're glued together. I have here 30-minute Pro Epoxy, Great Plains. I use a lot of Great Plains epoxy. I like it a lot. The 30-minute, I just happen to have a bunch of it, so instead of using the 6-minute, I'm using the 30-minute. I have a sanding block for sanding the edge of the PC boards. Tubing cutter, I probably said that. I have some flux, rosin flux, and I have some solder. I got soldering guns off on the side. I will also have to use a drill, and I'll be using a hand drill for that. I didn't bother to put that up here on the table. But nothing that needs like a drill press or a power sander or anything like that. This can all be done with hand tools to make this holder. So here in a minute I'll clear all this stuff away and I'll start on it. Okay, we're back at it again. I have this one, like I say, I have the one contact plate done already. I've glued 2 of these boards together. I don't know where else you can get these. I get them from Radio Shack, but I saw that there's a source in the UK for it. There may be a source overseas for them, for these breadboards or PC boards. This size board for this particular one is like 1.77 inch. It could be smaller. It's almost too big for 3/18650, but it's what I got. That's what I'm going to use. The light that's going to be made out of this, the board diameter hasn't been established yet, so it'll fit the battery holder. You could probably even do 4/18650 on this, but there's these come in different sizes. I'm just trying to get as close as I can to what I want. Now, the way I made a double thickness board is I have 2 boards, one that's larger than the other. And I'm sort of anal about it, so I align all the little holes, okay, so that both boards are exactly the same. And then I just take and lay it down on the table, and I just take a marker and mark around it, all the way around, with a magic marker. And then I just take my pair of clippers here, and I start clipping that board off Okay, I just cut down in, and you see it breaks off a piece, and I can work my way around that way. And if you'll notice, I mean, it's sort of messy, you know, and the pieces are flying everywhere. I could do it over top of the trash can, which is where I'm headed. But if you notice, as I clip little sections, that it tends to break the outside, but not the center. And it's just because, you know, you have the most mass this way and the least mass that way, so it'll tend to break out towards the outside rather than break towards the center about 99% of the time. Not saying that it won't do it the other way, but I'm just saying is if you just go easy, like I'm only using, you know, part of the clippers, cut off a small area, and it pops it right off. Anyways, I'm going to go all the way around and do that, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so I've gone over to the trash can and I've cut this whole thing all the way around. And I'm going to take a pair of scissors and I'm going to try to get just about to the inside of that black ring, because that'll be the diameter I want. So I'm going to work on cutting the edges a little bit with the scissors, just, you know, shaving it down as I go along and trying to get a little bit more material cut off with the scissors, okay, all the way around. And just, you know, I work at it slowly and just try to cut some off. Now the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm going to have to sand down whatever I don't cut away. I have to sand it down to fit, and so it's just less sanding is all it amounts to. So I'm going to go ahead and do this over the trash can, and I'll be back. Okay, so I've cut that board down to pretty close to the diameter of what I want it to be at, and I've got the two boards together the way I want them. Okay, and now I'm just going to take that edge that's left and I'm going to work around it with the sanding block. I just put it in a vise where I can hold them in place, and then I'll just take my sanding block and work on that and work it down to where it's the same diameter as the other board. I'm using 120 grit paper, so it'll cut that board down pretty quick, and I'll go ahead and do that. I'm not going to just sit there and show you, you know, that I'm sanding for the next 20 minutes. You know, you can see what I'm doing. Thanks. Okay, so I've sanded these boards down so that they're the same size now. I also sanded the faces of them where they're going to be stuck together with epoxy. I've mixed up some epoxy, and I'm just going to take a little of my finger and go ahead and just put a very thin film on. I'm just wiping a very thin film of epoxy on there. I don't want a lot. I don't necessarily want it filling up the holes. Okay, so I'm just using a thin layer of epoxy on there. Let's see, that's not too bad. A little more in there. Okay. Then I'll do the same on the other side, or on the other board. Do the same thing with the epoxy. I'm just going to dab a little in there, and then I'm just going to move it around and get it on that board. And take a look here. Get a little more in there. Okay. Basically, it's just wetting the board. I mean, that's all. I don't have a lot of epoxy on there, just enough to wet that board. Okay. So I've got epoxy on both sides, and that's, of course, it's 30-minute epoxy, so I can sit here and run my mouth, and it won't stick together yet. I'll take and put these two boards together and get the holes lined back up again, close as I can. Alright, make sure I don't have a lot of epoxy on my fingers. And then all I'm going to do from there is I'm going to take this over to the vise, and I'll clamp it in the vise and leave it for about an hour, even though it's 30-minute epoxy. That's what I'm doing right now. I just take and clamp that in the vise, And then the next step will be using an 18650, which all I have is an 18650 dummy cell, solar force dummy cell, protected, measures like 70 millimeters overall, something like that, 71. But I will take that and I'll mark where the 3 batteries are going to be on the holder, and then I'll also mark where the 3 upright rods, or maybe even 4. I'm probably going to put an upright rod right through the center, and then a rod in between the batteries, 3 places, 1, 2, 3. Once I get those marked, I'll drill them for 1/8" holes. Then I'll be taking the brass rod and figuring out my length and cutting that brass rod with the little pipe cutter I got, tubing cutter I have. Then I can start prepping that to put together. Once I have the marks on here for where the batteries are going to set, then I'll be using the copper, the copper rounds onto the plate. I'll be soldering them on and soldering on the connections to make it in series. So that's what's going on. I'm not going to do anything more until that glue dries, and then we'll go from there. Okay, well, I've got the second contact plate out of the vise now. It's epoxy's hardened up, and I don't know if you can be able to see this or not, but I've marked where the batteries are going to go. Okay, 1, 2, 3. I've also marked where these rods are going to go. Okay. I've cut and measured my 4 rods, my 4 brass rods. I've got them all cut to 76 millimeters and put them in the vise and made sure they're all flush so that they're all the same length. And I've cleaned out the holes with X-Acto after cutting them with a tubing cutter to make sure that an 1/8" pop rivet goes inside them. That's what's going to hold it together. I'm going to drill the holes through these, okay, drill 1/8" holes through these. Then the 5/16 tubing will set against that, and then the pop rivet will come in from the other side, go into the tubing, and when I compress the pop rivet, it'll expand inside the tubing, and it'll all be locked together. I could use screws or bolts or all that kind of thing, but I've got tubing and I've got pop rivets, so that's what I'm going to use. So the next step will be I'll go ahead and take all 4 or both of these contact plates together, get them lined up together, and then I'll just drill the holes right through both of them at the same time. Then after that will be time to go ahead and put the copper rounds in place in the centers, and I have 3 springs here, 2 for one end and 1 for the other. So I have some fairly heavy-duty springs in case this thing takes any amount of amperage, and we should be all set. Okay, I've drilled out these contact plates. Got the 4 holes drilled. Drill them with both of them together at the same time so that the holes will be the same. And I've taken in and used some of my rosin flux on the plate itself. I've taken these copper rounds and added solder to them. And I'm not going to put any solder on here, I've just fluxed these. Then what I'll do is I'll get them in place where I want them, and I'll use my hemostats, okay, then take the soldering iron, touch it to the copper, let it heat until the solder spreads out, and it'll solder it right to the board. Okay, I got to do that on both plates. I'll also be adding my springs, and on the ones that I need springs, I should be able to put the spring in as well and solder the whole thing at one time. That's the idea anyways. So that's what I'm going to do next, is I'm going to solder all the contacts on here, and then I'll come back and show you how that came out. Okay, the contact plates are soldered up, and here I have two positives and a negative. On the other plate I have two negatives and a positive, and on the back side of the plate, like this one, it'll be the bottom, this will be the negative, that'll be a bridge across the two, this will be the positive, and that'll be a bridge across the two. That completes my series circuit. So I have a choice here. I can use a piece of copper laid between here and solder to both contacts, or I can take a wire and run it through and make contact that way. Not sure yet, not positive yet how I'm going to do that. If I have some copper sheet, which I probably do, I may use copper sheet right across here, because it's not going to hurt anything. The uprights are out here and then right in the very center, so I can run copper in between those two, make my joint. I don't know for sure yet. I'm gonna play around with that. But anyways, as far as the solder, the excess solder on them, I'll just use a razor knife and clean that off on these so it looks a little better. I mean, they're functional the way they are. It's just appearance is all it is. So that's where I'm at right now. I need to make the contacts so that the circuit is complete, and then I'm going to go ahead and put everything together. Okay, well, I don't know if I'm just making a big mess or I'm making a battery holder. I chose to go ahead and use copper plate to bridge between the contacts, and I've soldered in, this will be the positive, go to the center, and this one will be to the negative. So I have the contact plates all done, I have the bridges done, and I have my connection to do positive and negative. I don't know yet for sure how exactly I'm going to do positive and negative. I have to think about that just a little bit, because I'm going to have those brass rods in there and one in the center, so I have to see if I want to isolate that or exactly how I'm going to do it. So I got to give that a little bit of thought, and I have a lot of cleanup to do. I'm just showing you the raw stage. There's a lot of solder that needs to be removed off these. A lot of cleanup all around to make them look halfway decent. I'll go ahead and pause here again and try to figure out the positive and negative. Okay, well, what I've come up with that center post is that I'm concerned that center post, you know, the negative side is going to be end up touching, the positive side and the negative side both will be end up touching, and so I don't want that shorting out. So I went ahead and cut a center section out of that. Okay, so it's two pieces, and then I'm using a piece of plastic, hard plastic tubing, which I drilled out 5/16, so that both those pieces will go up inside that plastic tubing, and it'll be a press fit to go inside that plastic tubing. Then all I got to do is just press them until I get the overall length what I want, and that way that center support no longer can make contact from one end to the other. hopefully that'll work. We'll try it out. Okay, so now the holder is together. You can see the brass rods are in place and they're riveted on. Okay, there's also, I used some heat shrink tube on the brass rods so they wouldn't be bare brass. And the center tube now is has the plastic insert in the middle, and the brass doesn't touch at both ends, you know, so it's not going to short anything out. Try to give you some idea of how it looks, but that's it. Now the next thing, or the last thing, is I need to go ahead and make the contact plates for negative and for positive. So that's the final step, and that'll finish it up. And that's what I'm going to work on now. Okay, for the upper contact, for the positive contact, what I've done is I've taken this, it's actually the end off a drill extension, and I put it on a piece of wood. I center it, and then I smack it with a hammer. That forms a depression, that forms the top, the button. And then I take a socket and put it around the outside and smack it with a hammer until I get a flat edge around the outside. And that'll go as the positive terminal on the battery holder. The negative terminal, I don't have any more. I'm running out of most supplies, and I'm trying to cut them back because during the summer I won't be doing any mods. It's too hot. So I'm just going to have to use brass, and I'll drill a hole in the center, and that'll be the negative contact. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll finish this thing up all the way. Okay, well, this is it. The positive contact's been soldered to the wire and soldered to the upper section. The negative contact is the same, soldered to the wire and soldered to the bottom section. One thing I will do when I can get the stuff forward, I will cover this here so it, you know, it can't short out. I'll cover that all up. Most likely I'll just use Captain tape. Other than that, I don't know, I may use some epoxy, but that's just sort of a finishing touch. The rest of it is done, and I tested it with my 18650 dummy cell, and it works, it fits in, so should be all set to go. But it's not something that I mean, it's not like a professional job. This is with hand tools. You don't have to have any power tools. I did use a hand drill, but other than that, I didn't use any power tools to do it. And in a pinch, it's something you can make yourself, rather than store-bought. Now, is it better? No, it's not better. I mean, you can go to CN Quality Goods and buy one of these 18650 holders, I think, for $8 or $10. They're probably made better than this. Well, I'm sure they're made better than this. This is all handmade. But if you want to do something and feel that you've accomplished something, hey, at least it's an idea and it's a way to go about it. All right, thanks for watching.